Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of video game news for Friday, May 31st. Starting late today because today has been quite a bit of a journey. A lot of non-YouTube stuff I was going to have to deal with anyways, but on top of that then my car seemed to have broken its alternator, I guess, is what it seems like the problem is. I'm going to have to wait till Monday to even begin to have a chance of knowing as far as car repair places. But yeah, my car said the battery is dead, and then a bunch of secondary systems started failing, like the air conditioner and the anti-lock brake system and things like that, all of which I now have been told are indicators of the alternator and not the battery just being dead. I took the battery. Battery was under warranty. It was only a year old. I went to get a replacement battery, got a replacement battery, and within a few seconds of getting the replacement battery, it brought up the car battery is dead symbol again. My only hope here is that now that I have a brand new battery in it, the alternator hasn't in a few seconds absolutely ruined that brand new battery. But I'm hoping that's not the case. It probably isn't the case. But on the other hand, if you had something that was putting in or trying to charge a battery to a lower voltage than what it could really hold, you could put a lot of strain on it instantaneously. Like, now this is weird. The season just ended prematurely, I guess, from my mark, and so we are at season 30 and we are down to silver. So the question was, now that I'm just playing less of Yu-Gi-Oh, and today, since we're starting late, we're going to play very little of Yu-Gi-Oh anyways, the question is, will this just balance itself out though? And will my deck just prove itself to be good enough to get a winning streak of 5, 6, 7 games in a row that would just skyrocket me back to gold and balance me out to gold no matter if I fall to silver? There probably isn't any hope to making platinum this month, but who knows? It severely has more to do with just how many of the festivals happen otherwise and how distracted I want to be with the festivals. But also the last festival that happened, I didn't get the exclusive protector, which I'm not sure there will ever be another way to get that protector, which probably doesn't really matter any. And see, at this point I don't think I have anything else to really talk about, because instead of making YouTube content and playing Fallout New Vegas, I think in the past 2 days I've just been busy with other stuff, and I've been watching this 2-season Australian show on Amazon Prime Video, which, yeah, that's just the streaming service I have, so I end up talking about it more. Spirited feels like it is a drama based on a living woman and a ghost that laid the foundation for the BBC show Ghost, which then was just remade to the American version of Ghost. But the BBC version of Ghost came out like 9 years after Spirited ended. But in the second season of Spirited, you see almost the exact same archetype of people as far as the ghosts. The first season, it really is just one ghost. So it kind of goes in a weird direction that way. And then they really don't do anything with the secondary ghosts too much. But yeah. I think a big problem with the first season is that there isn't a super easy way to write struggle challenge into a ghost. I mean, dead for eternity. Nothing can really happen to them. But yeah, it is also very interesting to see Spirited as a romance drama, and then compare that to Ghost, which is very much a comedy. But yeah, that's what I've been watching. That, and on a weekly basis, I've still been watching Akuma Game, a Japanese TV show that seems to be relatively new, where people are fighting for keys, and the keys summon devils and makes them play some kind of ridiculous logic games. Not really too far from playing a Shadow Duel in Yu-Gi-Oh! But Akuma Game is live action, probably based on a manga, probably a manga that runs longer and gets more into the details compared to the episodes of Akuma Game. And see, I don't know if I've been watching anything else. On a small note, my third monitor, which I use to monitor whether videos are looking correct, has died. It was a hand-me-down, it was very old, it had ghosting issues on it for the entirety that I've had it, but I just went to turn it on and it just wouldn't turn on. Not a big deal particularly. I had a third monitor before, and so simply that I'm back to using that third monitor. What is the issue mostly there is that it's just brought to my eyes what kind of monitor I'd like to buy as kind of a replacement, and there's an LG 43-inch monitor that takes 4 HDMI inputs and it is 4K resolution. So theoretically you could have the 4 outputs of a computer or 4 outputs from different things all plugged into one TV, and then you would have 4 monitors side by side in a 2x2 arrangement with no bezels anywhere on the inner dimensions at all. And that's really what I want to do. Inherently I want to rearrange my whole setup. I'm sitting in a recliner 8 feet away from a probably 60-inch TV right now, and as I've gotten older, my eyesight has gotten a little bit worse. A big part of that is it's really dependent on whether or not the game has been designed for a console versus a game being designed for PC. So when I'm playing something like Fallout New Vegas, which is a very old game that was designed, the PC version at least was designed to have the text a certain size, that's often difficult to read and getting more difficult to read from 8 feet away. I used to be 10 feet away, so I've already moved the chair up forward. More realistically, I should just move it to be 5 feet away. Of course, then it would be in almost the center of the room, just in the way of everything else. So I'm considering ways to potentially bring a monitor closer to my face, and while keeping the computer still across the room so its noise doesn't add too much to the recording. But yeah, it's a 43-inch monitor that is $600 roughly, which is too much for an average 43-inch monitor, but you are getting a 4K HDR monitor. Obviously I want it to be 4K, obviously I want it to be HDR. Even if I was going to get it that way, the 4K HDR elements are not things that I would spend too much focus on to begin with. I might get a 4K UHD Blu-ray player, upscaling Blu-ray player to play movies on it. But yeah, That's not something I need to buy at the moment unless my backup monitor dies. And it will create a weird situation certainly where I will have some extra monitors at that point and not have really the greatest of use for those monitors. But shuffle things around, that's not a big deal. Having TVs and monitors used to be a major focus of mine, being a videophile and audiophile back in the day at least. I don't know if I can really call myself one too much these days. A mediophile, when you're both a video and audiophile. Well, video and audio fans. Yeah. Moving from standard definition to high definition was a big deal. Moving from stereo to surround sound was a big deal to me. Moving from 1080p progressive to 4K or 2K, not really a big deal to me. High resolution only starts to make sense when you start to have 60, 70, 80 inch monitors, TVs, and they have to be fairly good at that point. High dynamic range is a much more interesting thing. Audio does kind of constantly add new standards, but when you don't really have any new movies that use the new audio encoding formats, it's kind of pointless. If anything, I would say the last 6 or 7 years audio has mostly been evolved as far as surround sound receivers into, does it support Bluetooth? Does it support Sonos? Does it support Spotify or iTunes streaming or something like that, where people are buying very expensive surround sound receivers and then playing internet radio at very low rates. So yeah, I've kind of gone 180 degrees backwards as far as caring about having monitors. Although I do have one monitor that's at like 720p, and that one should probably be thrown away. The lightness of monitors is more of a selling point these days. Just getting a new monitor so it's nice and thin and light and can be mounted with the proper wall mount even closer to the wall. But yeah, I'm not sure that this LG, I believe it's 43-700 in, or 7000 in, is the model. It's one specific model with 4 HDMI in. There's other ways you could do that, certainly. But having it built in is probably the best system. If only it wasn't 43 inches. If I could get a 60 inch, I would much prefer that. But in reality, I do need to move it closer to my eyes. I need to have my eyeballs closer to the text. So yeah, that's future looking. Of course, if my car's repairs bill is going to go through the roof, that's not a super high priority at that point. But yeah, and there certainly were other things I was thinking about spending money on. The Steam Summer Sale, for instance. Yeah. The absolute worst thing that can happen is that the Steam Summer Sale starts in the next few days, which it probably won't. And Steam Decks are just like discounted fairly well, because then I would like to buy some Steam Decks as gifts, but oh, that would just be terrible timing. I wonder if the Steam Summer Sale is also not trying to target itself closer to Father's Day also. Although I don't know if, well, there probably are gamer fathers out there. I don't know if they are the best market to really target, because they tend, I would suspect, to not be the people with a lot of extra free time. And while they may have some extra money, they wouldn't have that much money if they're a father, because you're taking care of kids and kids are expensive. Anyways, I think that's pretty much the entirety of all I can say as far as the catch-up section today. So let's go ahead and just go through some basic news. RetroArch version 1.19.0 has been released. Let's see. Adding several things to Apple achievements. Just updates in general. The problem with these kinds of change logs, though, is that they do often get buried in minutia as far as what the big changes worth reporting on might be. So we'll leave it at that. ZeniMax workers, which would be ZeniMax being the publishing parent company of Bethesda, are now covered by the Communication Workers of America and Microsoft's Labor Neutrality Agreement. Like Activision workers before, ZeniMax developers can now explore unionizing options without fear of interference on Microsoft's end, which I think this is probably assuming way too much for GameDeveloper.com. Microsoft has said they won't interfere. What they actually do and what they can get away with is much more of a different question. I do think this is a story worth pointing out, not because this is a big game company. ZeniMax also owns several of the other studios that have made some other games of interest, like the Doom reboot, although they did just shut down Arcane Austin, so if anything, Microsoft has already done some layoffs before any unionization was able to actually happen, which, yeah, maybe that's where the layoffs came from, is that they saw the writing on the wall and saw that CWA was going to push for more unionization. But as a gamer, the bigger story that needs to be said, and the interpretation and opinion I feel like I need to throw out here, is that ZeniMax workers, and in particular, let's just talk about Bethesda workers, have a habitual habit of working in an environment that has tolerated a lack of production. I think a lot of that comes from the top. I think a lot of that comes from Todd Howard being inconsistent, indecisive, or just a bad leader overall, and thus it takes forever for the next Skyrim game to come out. They have gotten a little bit better with Fallout games, but with the Fallout TV series, they've also now created a situation where fast is never going to be fast enough. Like, not unless they can have somebody churn out some kind of spin-off Fallout Prime TV show game in 6 months. Something fairly silly. Honestly, I think the best thing you could possibly do was just put skins in Fallout 4, and they've already done that. But you can't recreate the locations and the events of the TV series, even in that much time. It would be, any kind of spin-off game would be a good place to experiment with making Fallout games outside of the creation engine that is the proprietary version of the Gamebryo engine that they've modified and licensed. But yeah, I'm not getting to the core of my statement here. The premise here that I'm putting out is that already Bethesda game makers have been allowed to work fairly slow. One of the major complaints that anti-union management often makes is that union workers are slow and lazy and not as productive as other workers. Now, what they mean by other workers is the slave labor in China of underage workers or Chinese workers working for pennies or working for 12, 15, 16 hours a day. So yes, in a civilized country with more worker protections, they will be less efficient compared to countries that have no worker protections or very few worker protections, who can just be unethically worn down and used and spit out with no care of their health or no care of where their body or mind will be when they retire, if they even live to retirement. But yeah, the main point I want to make here, let me actually get to it, is nobody, and I mean nobody, should dare to, in a few years or at any point in the future, try to make a intellectually dishonest argument that says Bethesda or ZeniMax workers are not making games fast enough because they are in a union now, if they even get unionized. Yeah, because it's not going to be a factor at all. It wasn't a factor for decades before. But almost certainly, I think you'll see people push that mentality and that thought. Now, there are perhaps examples that you could make in other situations to make that argument, but in this case, absolutely not. If anything, the irony will be that we will see unionization potentially happen at ZeniMax, and that will lead to a sharper focus as union associate level employees are battling with management, anti-union management, who the anti-union management will be told from their higher ups to start to document and make cases to justify laying off people. Because when you can't just fire somebody for no cause, which is the main thing a union contract will absolutely negotiate for, is that you can't just say, I don't like this guy, or I'm not even going to give a reason to fire somebody. Then you have to make some kind of justification, make some paperwork, make a paper trail as to why an employee is worse than any of the other union employees and should be laid off. So, inherently, this is getting written up. You may very well see, because of unionization and management trying to all of a sudden create dirt and write up people, you might see that that puts a little bit of the fear of God into the associate level employees at ZeniMax and Bethesda, and all of a sudden there might be some faster production, better production as far as the work goes. Of course, that inherently comes down to whether the management can manage in any other way, because it's still very much a case that management could write people up and still not empower the employees to actually make a product that comes out. There's plenty of jobs like that where your boss is literally just setting you up to fail just so he can fire you for a union in a union position. Yeah. Of course, a lot of that running your business like that, as far as being over focused on productivity or metrics or just trying to find any excuse to write up anybody else, is 100% anti-artistic creation. It's just not how art works. the whole finding your muse, the whole sitting around and contemplating your navel concepts as far as artists go. Like, you have to have that stroke of brilliance to really do something brilliant. You can't really just make video games factory line experiences where employees are just screwing in a bolt into a nut over and over and over again for 8 hours a day. And the number of bolts and nuts you screw in is just your level of productivity. That's not the creative endeavor of making a game. Of course, we see, even without unionization, companies want to already disenfranchise or eliminate completely creative people, to the point where video games, in the minds of those type of people who are obviously cynical and don't really care about video games as art, they feel like they could potentially just have AI create everything without any human that has to be paid in the first place. And speaking of AI, if I'll throw out another controversial opinion, I don't think what I've said is too controversial, but certainly some people will disagree with me. I think this would be, the AI is a great example of where the role of government and taxation and legislation could be very, very helpful. If all of a sudden the government said, the US government, let's just say, if they said that you cannot use AI in any endeavor without paying, say, what's a big number? 25% of your total gross revenue. If it was just that there was a maximum, a very punitive, very high tax for using AI, that would be one way to set up one of two things: either forcing companies to say, well, now it's too expensive for us to rush into using AI, so let's slow down and only use it in situations where it seems absolutely like we'd actually profit from that. Or it sets up a bunch of tax cheats, corporations that, if the IRS was funded well enough, they could go after those tax cheats and flush out who would be the worst offenders of almost certainly other tax cheating schemes. But yeah, some tax of a reasonably high amount, something more than paying $10,000 or $20,000 in salary. That would have to be higher than $20,000 a year. It would have to be somewhere around $40,000 to $80,000 a year. So yeah, I guess roughly $100,000 per AI used per year. Just a flat $100,000 tax. Or $100,000 per employee replaced. But that would be hard to prove that any employee's been actually replaced. But yeah, that's kind of a long, rambly coverage of the GameDeveloper.com headline saying ZeniMax workers are now covered by the CWA and Microsoft's labor neutrality agreement. I am not sure any company has actually any subsidiary of Microsoft has actually unionized under CWA or anything else. Let's see if this works. it still seems like Multiverse's return, with now over 114,000 concurrent players at launch, was a big deal, certainly. It is a big deal. Guess I don't have anything else to say with that, so whatever, we'll move on. Probably should stop playing after this game too, otherwise this is just going to be a really late stream. GameDeveloper.com says Call of Duty's Game Pass debut has eschewed new sub-tiers. Microsoft has quashed concerns that Call of Duty Black Ops 6 is going to be a Trojan horse for a new pricier Game Pass tier. That really wasn't my concern, though. My concern was that Black Ops 6 would be on Game Pass Ultimate, what is already the higher tier, and not on any lower tiers. Yep. If all of a sudden 3 to 6 months after Call of Duty 6 comes out and you see Game Pass Ultimate increases its price, that would be where the Trojan horse would kick in. It doesn't make a lot of sense that they would just make something that would inherently be called the Call of Duty tier. And I can certainly see from Microsoft's perspective where Game Pass in particular might be very ideal for Call of Duty players who only play Call of Duty and maybe one other game per year. If all of a sudden you're giving those players Game Pass Ultimate and a taste of a whole bunch of more games, there might be a level here of converting the 1 to 3 games per year crowd into being more hardcore gamers who are more varied in the games they play. I don't know if that really makes you a hardcore gamer or not, as much as it just makes you a more varied gamer. And that overall is probably a great conversion to try and make happen, although I doubt it will succeed that much. Because all of a sudden, if you convert a 3 game at most per year player into a 10 game per year player, well, if there is a bad year of Call of Duty, they may still play 9 other games, some of which would very possibly be made by Microsoft. Blaze has announced this Evercade Alpha, which is a tabletop arcade machine that plays Evercade cartridges, which you kind of feel like this might be cool, but it really isn't that cool when you have these like tabletop arcades, because the buttons and controls have to be in the wrong position for what they should be for an arcade, because you're sitting on top of a table, so then they're several inches above where your wrist should be, and inherently your elbows are downward, so you're getting a twisting motion that you just would never really have in an actual arcade. You would be above the buttons in an actual arcade. So the proper way to possibly play this would be to have this on a table, stand up next to the table, and then it probably will be far too low. I have no care whatsoever around Evercade cartridges. Don't really even know what they are. And then, yeah, you have this kind of generic arcade cabinet form factor that doesn't really... It may evoke a little bit of nostalgia, but it's really not functional or greatly designed compared by modern standards. And then you can just kind of assume that this is a cheap LCD screen and effectively a Raspberry Pi equivalent worth of hardware without even knowing what's inside of it. And buying cartridges is effectively like buying a console that only really is going to support a very minimal amount of games. There definitely were a lot of also-ran type toy things that they tried to sell and make that were cartridge based. But yeah. As far as the games, it's just a bunch of Street Fighter and Mega Man games for the most part. Although, in fairness, at least this is something that's different enough that it is somewhat worth having an article around it. Whereas if somebody just made yet another Game Boy looking clone or a Raspberry Pi, Retro Pi type clone device, single computer board, that's not going to catch the majority of people's attention these days. Inherently, when you try to compare something that like this to the Steam Deck wins just on the face of it for the number of games you can have on it. These prices at $229 is also way too high, and that has constantly been the problem as far as these fake arcade machines, is that you're getting dangerously close to a third of what just buying a real arcade machine would cost. And I wouldn't recommend buying a real arcade machine either, because that is way too expensive. And it's not even that expensive. It is kind of expensive, but it takes up too much space for something that plays only one game, or maybe a couple of games. Arcade machines inherently only exist in their form factor because they had giant picture TV tubes in there and a lot of circuitry that would have been fairly giant by modern standards. Much like jukeboxes used to be huge because they had a whole bunch of records in them. And that takes up space. Whereas realistically, if you were going to make retro jukeboxes, it would be maybe 2 inches thick, and it would just stand up right against the wall. It would look like a jukebox, but it would just have an LCD screen, and you would select games, and it would just play via MP3s or internet streaming the music. And so it would just be the nostalgia front face of a jukebox that you want to see. Same is true for an arcade machine. If you were going to build an arcade machine, it really should be 2 or 3 inches thick before you get to the controls, and then the control layouts should just jut out for the proper size, maybe adding 6 to 12 more inches. But TV screens, LCD screens by modern standards, are pretty much flat. Speakers fairly flat. Circuitry fairly flat. The arcade machines just do not need to be anywhere as thick as they are. I think we're gonna leave it at that. And I would also say, I think this probably is proving that this isn't just going to be a walk in the park to get back to gold. Yeah. And I'm not sure I really accomplished all the daily quests, but apparently I did. I'm not 100% sure that I'm just not getting daily quests because I'm not logging in. That might also be an issue. So, GameDeveloper.com also says that Fallout 76 has netted 20 million players as Todd Howard assures that the franchise will continue. Of course, Todd Howard is going to say that. Inherently, though, the more Fallout 76 succeeds, the more likely that the next Fallout game is going to try and be closer to Fallout 76 and less of a single player experience. Inherently, the real problem with Bethesda is they need to rush out the next Elder Scrolls game, and then they are just not going to be able to enjoy any breathing room after they rush out the next Elder Scrolls game before they need to rush out the next Fallout game. And if they go backwards, then Elder Scrolls Skyrim fans are going to be very upset about that. But yeah, one of the things I'm also realizing about while playing Fallout New Vegas is, like, you have the ability to get swords and katanas and things like that. Clearly, the only reason you can pick up swords and katanas in Fallout is because you can use swords in Skyrim and the Elder Scrolls game, and it's just all the same code base. It would make so much sense to limit it down to guns, handguns, shotguns, and maybe sniper rifles. Yeah. Then, as far as explosives, you should have a secondary button that throws grenades. And then the grenades themselves might have several classes going up to like mini nuke level, in which you're actually setting off a mini nuclear bomb. But yeah, I definitely feel like it should be closer to something like Borderlands, as far as you just have 4 gun slots and a very limited amount of inventory and grenades as a secondary button. But there is really hundreds, if not thousands, of items that are in the game for no good reason, and you could really just do an optimization to eliminate all the bent tin cans. Since you can't do anything with a bent tin can, you could either eliminate them completely from the game before you'd released it, or you could have just replaced them with tin cans. And then there would have been there is something you can craft with tin cans, but there is quite a few things that you just can't do anything with. It's just vendor trash, and it's not even valuable vendor trash. Moving on, I suppose it's important to point out what official sequels are for games that get their 15 minutes of fame and become somewhat popular, because Exit 8 in particular was very quickly cloned with cheap ripoff games. Exit 9, I believe, is one of them, from a different developer. So the official sequel to Exit 8, Platform 8, is now available on PC. I imagine it probably isn't much bigger than Exit 8 is, but yeah, at least it's a proper game from the same creator. See if they can succeed wildly twice, or if people have already passed that meme and on to the next meme game. Let's see. Video Games Chronicle says Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater might not be released until 2025. It's being claimed. That's believable. Honestly, it's fairly believable that it won't ever be released at all. Take-Two has discussed its decision to announce not to announce Grand Theft Auto 6 for PC. Strauss Zelnick says Rockstar will make more announcements in due time. Like, pretty obviously it's coming to PC. Even if it was 5-10 years later, it's coming to PC. There's just no way GTA 6 now, would not come to PC. even if they stretched it for years in the hopes that people would play on consoles, in the hopes that that might get them more microtransactions or something, or maybe they got a really good exclusivity contract. Theoretically, that could be a reason. Even if they stretch it for years, it's still going to come to PC. If it never came to PC, then it would either be the death of the GTA series, which I think as gamers we might want to come together and have that discussion, is it really relevant to play the next GTA game, or should we just all collectively boycott the GTA series just because of like GTA Online and microtransaction reasons, and move on to perhaps a different game, maybe a more mature game, maybe a more violent game. There's a lot of different ways in which I imagine GTA is going to be right in the mushy middle, in that it isn't going to cause a level of controversy that previous GTA games have made. But yeah, undoubtedly I'd say it's coming to PC. And so the bigger question is this even relevant video game news to report on? Say Take-Two has discussed its decision not to announce GTA 6 for PC, or is this just a headline they wanted to use so GTA 6 would be in the headline? The PlayStation State of Play happened. I watched somebody else watch it on YouTube. I guess that was something video game related I actually did. Wasn't very impressed with it. It didn't have really a lot of games. Some of the games did seem kind of interesting. We'll kind of go through them all today, I'm sure. The third game was a Dynasty Warriors reboot, Dynasty Warriors Origin. That was the first like Japanese game that they started to focus on, and then it definitely seemed like by the third game there was a decent mix of Japanese games. So the first couple of games definitely gave the feeling that this was more of a Western game presentation, but then the back half of the State of Play was actually the Konami Silent Hill transmission, which showed 30 minutes of gameplay of Silent Hill 2. The initial trailer on that still seems to highlight a lot of violence and shooting of guns in Silent Hill 2, which definitely makes me think that Silent Hill 2 is going to be, perhaps in its landmark and its story, faithfully remade, but the actual gameplay mechanic probably is going to be a little tweaked, where you're going to just have a little bit more bullets and shoot a little more enemies. Unfortunately, it being faithfully remade in its visuals also includes the incredibly short field of vision that you have and the fog that covers up everything in the city, which I imagine people who play the game want it to be exactly that way. But if you were going to make a pure reboot that was going to attract a new audience, I don't think you can have fog that is just 4 or 5 feet away from the protagonist. It is definitely going to be a case where fans of Silent Hill 2 are going to have to convince new people to play Silent Hill 2. The game itself is not going to do that. And there is still a real problem in the fact that Silent Hill 1 is non-existent in this reboot path. So my first thought, knowing nothing else about Silent Hill 2, would be to say, where's Silent Hill 1? And then I'd probably try and play Silent Hill 1, which would probably be a nightmare with no remake. Then there was a brief Alien Rogue Incursion first look trailer and screenshots. This is a VR game, though. Definitely seems like when you can't license anything else, you can always license Alien. And yeah, it's very difficult to have a good and successful Alien game. And then I guess the Alien movie might still be in development, maybe. Gamatsu has an article here, Princess Maker 2 Regeneration, which was a remake / remaster of Princess Maker 2, has been delayed for the PS5 and 4, delayed to August 8th due to content changes. The Switch and PC versions are coming out July 11th still. So the content changes almost certainly are going to be some kind of censorship. Yep, changes to comply with ethical standards in the Switch and PC versions. Not really going to try to do that. Princess Maker 2 was a daughter raising simulator. Here we can compare some animation styles here. I'm not sure which one of these though you would really prefer, the soft pastel paintings of this upper size or the sharper hard-edged colored marker style down here. Definitely see a lot more detail in the wood over here than this. But yeah, Princess Maker is a daughter raising simulator. It does, controversially at the time, have, I don't know if it was a Easter egg or mod or cheat. I don't think it really was even much of a mod, where you could have your daughter at fairly young ages be, I think it was just topless, but maybe completely naked. Probably not. That would have been a lot for when this game came out, many decades ago. And while that may have been a rumor that got a lot of people to try it, it's certainly not the thing that would have kept people playing. Here you can see there's some cleavage and legs showing, although in fairness, while the cleavage is not showing here, at least this is probably more lewd of a pose leg wise than this is. And yeah, depending on how well you raised the daughter, she might become a empress, she might become a thief. And yeah, the major problem, unfortunately, with the Princess Maker series is that none of the other games really made a big splash in the Western world, and they still are trying to make them, but to no real success. And they really haven't done anything interesting or to the series or to update it, and it is just a simulation game that is effectively simulating doing a job. Raising a parent, raising a child is effectively a job, as close as you could say, and it is a lot of work and a lot of uncertainty as far as the outcome. One of the things about this remake is that it does give you certain status bars, whereas the original Princess Maker game you would have had to just use a walkthrough to get certain endings if you wanted it. And the game is too long to really try and get all the different endings. Inherently, since this is a Japanese series and there is less interest even in the Japanese of having kids, you're fighting an uphill battle even for that reason, as far as the lack of interest. It definitely would make a lot more sense to make it a cell phone game where you could just deal with it and make small choices every now and then. Oh, we have a full list of the censorship that the PlayStation version is getting, which this is, either you could be generous and say this is remnants of the old people at Sony Interactive Entertainment and the rules that have yet to be changed, or this is just that the new CEOs are going to maintain the same censorship policies that the old leadership did. But yeah, they have removed an item that would increase the daughter's bust size, and inherently bust size, I think, led to different outcomes who she would be potentially suited with or married. And it has also removed the removal of the endings marriage with father and marriage with the butler, two male characters that she would have grown up with. Although I believe she is not blood related to the father in the story, for whatever that means for you or not. So yeah, the mod to make the character naked, I think actually must have been a mod, otherwise that would have been eliminated also. The same situation happened with the hot coffee mod too. Like, you needed a mod to actually see the content that was left and locked behind unviewable walls in GTA when the hot coffee mod came out. And that was very poorly reported on, to say that any kid with a copy of GTA could have seen the hot coffee content, but you really couldn't. At least that's my understanding. You had to install a mod, and it was a mostly console game, so you would have had to really, back in the day, done a lot of work to install that mod. Princess Maker games, I will also say, as we wrap up here, it's just kind of surprising how many different kinds of genres people experimented with and created back in the day for so many to flop and nobody to really try it again for decades later. There's like one game I know of on Steam that tries to make a daughter raising simulator type experience, and there are maybe a few games where those kinds of concepts are integrated into more traditional styles of gameplay and are less emphasized on. I guess technically BioShock 2 has a daughter raising simulator, or is it BioShock 1, where you can get a good ending or a bad ending, but it's just two endings. It's not somebody putting in the effort to make multiple different endings. Moving on, Until Dawn is another example of a genre of game that was revolutionary in its creativity and unfortunately hasn't really led to a lot of copycats or other people trying it. The only thing I can really say is that the makers of Until Dawn have made a lot of copies of Until Dawn themselves with an anthology series of horror games, none of which really were anywhere as well received as Until Dawn was. Now, there's definitely, with this Until Dawn remake being shown, a question as far as, has Until Dawn in its original version ever come to PC? Or is this remake wherein it's coming to PC? Of course, inherently, you have to hope people just don't care about being spoiled on Until Dawn for such an old game, since everybody who's played it before will be spoiled. Otherwise, you're just not going to convince a lot of people to go back and try it again. I also think Until Dawn was very much a mainstream video game journalist darling style game, where they talked about it way too much, and actual gamers didn't ever play the game or care about it. But yeah, I don't think any of these Sony State of Play announcements were even new. The Silent Hill 2 remake launches October 8th. Yeah, a lot of that 30-minute gameplay is showing off shooting abilities and shooting. Here is the fog I was talking about, and honestly, I think this is a cutscene, and the fog is actually worse looking in actual gameplay. Inherently, I would want to wonder, with Silent Hill 2 coming out, does Konami really have a plan for a Silent Hill 3 remake or some kind of continuation of some kind of game called Silent Hill 3, or even Silent Hill 1, because even if this game is received particularly well, if fans then have to wait another 10 years before Silent Hill 3 got remade, that's not really revitalizing your gaming business or for Konami, or revitalizing this old series. Inherently, the trailer showing so much action also highlights how Silent Hill was very much replaced with Resident Evil, and while Resident Evil went more action by the time it hit Resident Evil 4, it hasn't stayed all action all the time. 7 and 8 going back to horror. So Silent Hill has a hard time differentiating itself when it too wants to be action. Yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that. Now, the best looking game here that I think was announced at the Sony State of Play is Astro Bot, getting a full price platformer. This will be the first time Astro Bot has been in a full non-VR game, and what they show in Astro Bot is a lot of characters and Easter eggs from other exclusives from PlayStation in the past, like the God of War series. And what it overall looks like, let's see if we can maybe turn on the blur. Nope. Where is it? There we go. I think it's 37. Yeah, it's 34. Blur should be enabled now. And then let's kind of jump around, because I think this trailer is kind of worth showing off, in that how much of this is just, let's make a Mario game, since we ripping off as much as we can think that would feel like a Mario game, without having any of the license to Mario. And you know what, that's kind of a genius move on PlayStation's part, because Sony should have realized they weren't going to get a Mario game on the PlayStation at least a decade ago, if not 2 decades ago. So here you have an Astro Bot sumo wrestling. Here you have Astro Bot getting a boxing gloves and platforming, and yeah, this just screams, if you were going to make a Mario game, what could you do? Here you see Astro Bot getting really big after sucking up water, swimming. Then they start to do a lot of references of other characters, which makes me wonder if Astro Bot is going to just end up going to other worlds. Here you can see a flying PlayStation 5 fighting an alien. Here you have a giant robotic donkey. Here you have a octopus. Yep. It may be that there's a lot of ring arena boss fights and a lot of punching that goes on. But yeah, pretty much every other Astro Bot game has just been a demo to try and show off either a new PlayStation controller hardware or VR hardware. So now that he seems to have finally gotten enough funding to just have his own game, that this is potentially setting him up for a level of success. Now, there are some problems here, in that they didn't do this first and then make some demo games. It's coming to PS5 exclusively, not PS4. That's probably a mistake too. But yeah, they definitely should have done that first, or made a game like that first, then made the side VR games and controller demo games. But it still creates a pretty obvious gap in my mind as far as kids games or kid-friendly games on the PlayStation. You just cannot spend $500, $600 on a PlayStation 5 to buy Astrobot as the one game that's appropriate for your 8-year-old, 10-year-old, 12-year-old. There just really isn't anything else that kids would want to play exclusively on a PS5. Now, it does feel like there's a lot of big brother, big sister effects where a 14, 15, 16-year-old has a PS5, thus the younger kids are playing games on PlayStation, the third-party games that are available also on Switch and also on the Xbox. But yeah, you're not really locking in the audience like Nintendo does. Sony has yet to do that. Now, if they could make an Astrobot game and make half a dozen more of those in the next year, that would be something. But they're going to have to create a bunch of characters, certainly. And even in this game, you do have the problem of them making references to older games, older age games. So you have to ask the question, who is the real target audience when you see Kratos as a character in an Astrobot game? Or Astrobot dressed up like Kratos. Yeah, you cannot really do a Kingdom Hearts in the same way Kingdom Hearts does it, where you have kid-friendly Disney characters, but then you also have slightly more mature Final Fantasy looking characters. Although, in fairness, I do think Kingdom Hearts may have Final Fantasy looking characters that still act age appropriate to the Disney level of characters. The entire Silent Hill transmission, I do not believe it's really worth watching. As far as PlayStation and PC, they still don't really get it. So God of War Ragnarok on PC is going to require a PlayStation Network account. PC version of Ghost of Tsushima only requires one for online multiplayer, and Helldivers 2 at the moment has done a U-turn and not requiring a PlayStation account at all. I saw a trailer with Kratos in it in the State of Play, and I suspect it was very much for the PC version of Ragnarok. I do not believe that they plan on making another God of War in this series. They probably are going to make a new God of War eventually, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's set like hundreds of years in the future and the boy is just out of the picture, and the Dad of War concept may be completely out of the picture too. Although you can't really put it too far in the future before it's just being set in modern times, and at that point you're making something like Neil Gaiman's American Gods with Kratos, which would be an interesting twist, but I just don't see how you do that. I think it would just make more sense to say everything happened in this series and then Kronos magically sends him back in time, back before all of the events that had happened before. They may have already done that trick. It may very well be that they just need a full-on reboot of Kratos as a character, and a full-on reboot of the story. But yeah, it certainly doesn't help when you have your big presentation and then you make a blunder that a lot of people are going to complain about and talk about, as far as mentioning that it requires a PlayStation Network account. when you could easily have just said, we don't have those details available for you at this time, and just hidden that for a while. Also, it's worth pointing out, according to, let's see, I think this is GameDeveloper.com, Sony has said that they gutted PlayStation Studios to, quote, keep room for future growth. So, 900 layoffs and studio closures, which they're saying that keeps room, which is ridiculous. Completely. Yeah. And certainly you can read this whole story if you're interested, but I think the headline really just shows a lack of honest speech coming from PlayStation Studios, or Sony in general. And yeah, I do not foresee good times ahead for PlayStation. I think they're gonna manage it into the ground, and frankly, PlayStation has not been perfect as a game console developer or first party developer anyways. Yeah. Moving on. Let's see. Why did I click on the circuit with Emily Chang? I have no idea. I may have just accidentally. No, I clicked on it because whoever this person is, some kind of Bloomberg original presented by AT&T Business. She has an episode here where she has been allowed inside of YouTube headquarters. Now, I think this is fairly stupid on several reasons, but rather dangerous in one reason, in the fact that at least one crazy YouTuber, we never got to follow up what happened to that crazy YouTuber, came to a YouTube office, and I'm not sure if she actually shot the gun, but she waved around the gun. And YouTube totally flipped out on that, totally expected that more people would be sympathetic, but inherently the quote-unquote crazy person was claiming that her channel was being demonetized or downvoted and not highlighted specifically. And certainly the vast majority of YouTube content creators can sympathize with that feeling, that they are being treated unfairly by the YouTube algorithm. So why show the inside of the office for security reasons? Why show the inside of an office for any reason, really? Secondhand, as an issue, if the office looks cool and fun and well decorated, that's not going to make anybody really feel like YouTube is a better company. If the office looks terrible and run down and unkempt, well, that's not going to inspire confidence in YouTube either. So either you're going to create a level of jealousy, for a lack of a better term, if the office looks great, and people are going to say, oh, these YouTube employees are sitting around in a life of luxury and they can't even do their job right and make the algorithm work, or they're going to look like, or it's going to be a mess and people are going to go, oh, look how unorganized and awful these YouTube employees are, that they can't even keep their office clean. So yeah, all of this being done to kowtow to Bloomberg, to kowtow to the idea of being a bigger company and making the shareholders want to invest more in YouTube. Let's see. Here you can see YouTube advertisers reposting this. And this is Neil Mohan, the new CEO of YouTube, taking around. On a certain level, I guess this is probably the best thing that a CEO could do, is rub elbows with other business people and keep business relationships going smoothly. So I can't really complain too much. But yeah, fix your dumb algorithm is just the basic response you could say to any post from any YouTube Twitter account. I imagine if we looked at comments here, she'll be lucky in these 12 comments if they are positive. Let's see, do we really need to see all the comments? Not really, and I can't pull them up anyway, so I'll leave it at that. So Panic made the kind of ridiculous device toy called the Playdate. Well, they had said several months ago that 400,000 of the Playdates had been stolen, I think out of Las Vegas shipping facility. We do get a follow-up on the story here, in that they now have said they've recovered these stolen Playdates after lots of, quote, detective work. But yeah, they're saying that these got hastily dumped at a random restaurant this morning, which I almost wonder if it was always my thought that these 400,000 units had just been either non-existent in the first place. I guess that's probably not the case in this case, or they had just been misfiled into or misshipped somewhere, that this wasn't really the Vegas heist they were making it out to be. And if this is $400,000 worth of Playdates, that really just highlights that Playdate is really expensive. Let's assume that the 40 on the box means there's 40 Playdates in each of these boxes. Then let's assume that in most this is 2 deep. It looks like it's only 1 deep. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. Let's say it's 25. So 25 times 40 would be, let's see, about 1,000 of them. If I'm doing the math right. So if they were like $40 each, and there was 1,000 of them, then that would be 40,000. So I must be off on my count somewhere by far. And certainly when you come to shipping, like one entire truck could have quite a lot of value. And I can't help but feel like this isn't just a made-up story overall, just to keep people talking about the Playdate, when the real reaction they have to this is that the Playdate is still irrelevant and it's still just a ridiculously overpriced toy that is never going to really compete against the console and isn't cheap enough to be a toy on its own. So yeah, I really just want to leave it at that. Neil Mohan also was doing a women at YouTube employee resource group meeting, I guess, which highlights they have like 5 women willing to stand next to him and take a picture. That's probably not a lot compared to the number of people working at YouTube, particularly if you start to include all of the people in India who are doing most of the work at YouTube, it seems. That would be my guess. In particular, I would say YouTube as a service is fairly women friendly, so there probably should be more women employees at YouTube. I could see reasons why they might have better offers elsewhere, though. Of course, if I'm going to really hold YouTube Twitter accounts to the feet to the fire, YouTube Gaming is still by far the worst. Just giving you a Minecraft themed, I imagine, word find. Just really pointless. Oh, this does remind me though, one of the things I wanted to say, and this is weirdly video game news related, is Linus Tech Tips talked about in his WAN podcast that he is actively trying to digitize the masters of the animated first CGI cartoon Reboot, called Reboot. And that's interesting because Reboot is a cartoon about sprites, non-playable characters being trapped in video games, or having to play in video games. And it's kind of an interesting twist, is that the non-playable characters have to play in these video games, and if they don't, then their world gets destroyed. Part of the world gets destroyed if they don't win. So the player character is inherently, unknowingly, destroying the Reboot character's world. But yeah. So he's actively trying to digitally encode the remasters, potentially at some point to release like a Blu-ray, which I know there's a lot of Reboot fans out there who would be interested in that. The major problem, though, is that it seems like the masters were effectively created in a very, very non-standard file format for a very non-standard digital tape of some sort. And so there is potentially less than a dozen of the video devices around, and who knows if any of them can be worked together to actually work. So that they have to desperately get this off of this non-standard format and get it into a more standard format. Otherwise it's potentially just going to be lost forever. There is probably some other data recovery things they could do, but they're not actually trying to do that, and one would hope that they wouldn't stick so much to their guts on that aspects that that would actually... I have no idea what this game is supposed to be. I thought this was some kind of weird Fallout mod, but no, it really isn't. But yeah. So that would be intriguing, I guess, with the Reboot cartoon game. It is still a 90s cartoon, though, so it is worth pointing out that it won't be anything amazing as far as writing goes. Moving on, GameDeveloper.com says that Toys for Bob has teamed with Microsoft on the first indie game. Oh, let's see. Yeah. So they previously worked on Spyro and Crash games. Yep. And with that, I think I need to take a break, so I'm going to pause the recording and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. So, yeah, we were talking about Toys for Bob teaming with Microsoft on the first indie game. Which could be anything, really. But it does perhaps show a bit of a trend in that the non-Nintendo kid-friendly games seem to be coming back in vogue. It definitely seems like you've got the assumption here, and it's a big assumption to make, is that Toys for Bob is going to make something like Spyro that is kid-friendly and targeting the next generation. Inherently, I imagine this is both Microsoft and PlayStation with Astrobot trying to scale up for what could be the next Nintendo console, which we know is likely coming out in early 2025. These games, though, are too early in development really to come out anytime close to that. So if anything, these kids games will come out 2, 3, 4 years after the Switch 2, whatever it actually is called, comes out. So if anything, this is more Microsoft and Sony fighting for second place for a kid-friendly console, which ignores the thought that the Steam Deck is probably going to be the second place for a kid-friendly console. Or they are heavily betting on the Switch 2 being a flop, which isn't a terrible bet to make, considering how most Nintendo consoles have a good console, then a bad console, then a good console, then a bad console. It's been that way for a fairly long time now. But yeah, of course, that is all around the big assumption that they're making a kid-friendly game. They may very well not be, because they're teaming up with Microsoft. This also might be a good example of where we are losing publishers in general and competition in general for game developers to find people to actually finance the development of their games through publishers. Like, that's generally what a publisher is. And we're not seeing a lot of games being made by investors or angel investors or anything else. Grants from the governments around the world, not really coming about. So yeah, there is a much higher danger that there will just be Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo that have enough money and are willing to spend enough money to let games be developed in the first place. Of course, you could always make a small indie game and release it on Steam Direct. It just won't get the advertisement that you would want. And so yeah, you really can't make a AAA game doing that. Although you also get maybe a little bit of more safety in self-publishing, in that you won't just be completely out of money for months, if not years, after you release your game. You'll see income coming back into your pocket much faster if you self-publish compared to a publisher, which is going to take most, if not usually all, the profits of a game. And that's a major reason why you see a lot of layoffs as soon as a game launches, or a few months after a game launches, is that the developer company is just not getting any income. They have to immediately find another contract and work on another game so that a different publisher or the same publisher is funding the development of that second game to keep themselves in business. It's not a good system. It's really isn't. Moving on, this almost certainly should have been the first bit of news we talked about, because people are more important than video games or businesses. Corporations are not people in my book, and never will be. Unfortunately, I just don't sort these headlines. That would just be more work than I'm willing to spend. But yeah, Jeff Fallen, a video game composer, has died at 58 years old, which makes him one of the few people who is at least at a reasonable age to die. The vast majority of people who are still in the game industry who die at shockingly young ages. On a rare occasion, you'll get somebody who was in the game industry but really hasn't been involved for a few decades, and then they are rather old. Fallen and his brother Tim were well known for their music in the 80s and 90s, games like Silver Surfer and the Incredible Crash Test Dummies. So this is another example, it sounds like, of musicians who did some video games in the 80s and 90s and haven't really been involved. He had pancreatic cancer. So we have an actual actual cause of death. Terminator 2 video game, Sly Spy Secret Agent, Tom and Jerry, Spider-Man, X-Men, Arcade's Revenge. After the release of Batman Forever in 1995, he stepped away from the game music to pursue other fields. He probably wasn't getting paid much, if I was to guess. So yeah, these are very old games that he would have made music for, which inherently means he would have made a lot of 8-bit, 16-bit style music, not what you would call a full orchestral composition or anything like that, because those kinds of games wouldn't have been able to handle that kind of music. And I have to wonder if he made it to 58 years old in part because he avoided the stress of working in the game industry and stepped away. But yeah, that is very much a silly speculation to make. But yep, we have yet another obituary. It's been a while since the last one, but it's definitely happening more and more, and it is to be expected that as the first generation, second generation of game developers start to get older, they are going to start passing away more and more. Here we have GameDeveloper.com saying Arcane Austin bids farewell to the Redfalls. Well, bids farewell with Redfall's final update. Which, yeah, I guess it's nice that they could make a final update on a game that almost nobody's gonna play. It does make an interesting argument, though. If all else fails as far as a video game is concerned, and nobody wants to play it, could you possibly get a few hundred, maybe 1,000 people more to buy your game by shutting down the studio and then having it have more of a historical relevance? You probably could, but it's not really a good way to do it. Like, inherently, let's pick Valve as a ridiculous example of a company that would never shut down. But let's say that Valve shut down tomorrow and all of their games, and so you would just have the list of the games they made and there would be no more. Well, I'm not going to inherently go back and play Half-Life Alyx or Counter-Strike 2 or their new game that hasn't even come out yet. I would go back and play Portal 1 and Portal 2. The games I know I love and the games I want to play. I'd go back and play the Left 4 Dead games if the servers were still up, in this fictional example. Same, I think, is more likely to happen here. If you are a fan of Arcane Austin, you're not going to play Redfall, you're going to play the games that people actually enjoyed from Arcane Austin, which I guess the easiest way to do this would be to just click this link and see if that brings us to a usable page. Nope, it doesn't even take us to a list of Arcane Austin developed games. Well, that was a useless hyperlink that is deceptive, just downright deceptive. It's supposed to be an actual ethical games journal, so you can't just have links that take you to completely different things. When I click this, I expect to be taken to a page that is a landing page for all the games that Arcane Austin has made and all the articles that GameDeveloper.com has written that involved Arcane Austin. That's exactly how it would work at Gamatsu. Moving on. Apparently Bloober's team's publishing deal with Private Division has been reportedly gutted. Take-Two's recent reductions in cut at Private Direction means Bluebird's one is on the hunt for a new publisher for its next original project. Which, okay. That almost is exactly what I was just saying, is that we are getting this situation where publishers don't have the money or aren't willing to spend the money to fund developers, and developers are going to start going out of business on their own. Even the small independent ones are. Yep, there's seemingly a forced amount of shrinkage to the industry, and being a creative industry, I don't think the number of projects being developed should go down. Most of them still suck, so it's not like the quality is going to go up in any way. With less competition and fewer people being capable of being creative. So yeah, more bad news. So why did I click on this? I believe, yes. I'm not sure this really happened, where Riven the sequel to Myst, was ever ported to an Apple II computer. I believe the first Myst was an Apple II, and here's what an Apple II looks like. It's basically a TV, 2 floppy disks, and a computer keyboard. But yeah, I believe Myst itself was programmed originally in HyperCard. And what you're seeing here definitely looks like HyperCard, which is effectively just a slideshow. But boy, does that look terrible. And that certainly isn't how I nostalgically felt like the original Myst game looked, although in fairness I may have never actually played the Apple II version of Myst, or played it for like 5 minutes. But yeah, tiny resolution. You can count the pixels, and it's probably somewhere around 240 by 240, and kind of a decent number of colors. Looks like you can have maybe 4 to 8 colors on the screen at the same time. But also, you definitely can see that a lot of this is just visually unreadable. It's really difficult to even tell. And then this is the animation of the pod moving, and it has just jumped completely down to a completely different type of animation. This is supposedly Riven squashed down into 140 kilobytes floppy disk, 144 kilobytes. It's probably actually only 140 kilobytes of usable space. So for that small amount of space, that speaks to how well optimized and compressed the code. Now notice it says disk 40. Yeah. So I don't believe this actually existed. You wouldn't be able to afford 40 discs. But yeah, it's an interesting perspective of somebody doing a project to take a very old game and port it to a console that's even older and less capable. In fact, just even being able to pretend like the Apple II works at all is saying quite a bit there. And Cyan retweeted this, which is to say they retweeted this guy who works at Cyan Worlds, who retweeted this guy who mocked up this whole thing. And yep, this is disc 39. Imagine this says 39 in the special made up language. Yep. And they're saying it's 140 kilobytes and you needed 48 kilobytes of RAM to use it. It's also worth pointing out, though, that this is very much something that is a blast from the past and kind of funny, but it's not relevant. Nobody's really going to take this port all the way to a finished game and actually play it, particularly since you have the new remake of Riven here in 4K, and they're showing off videos and elements of that. Here is the same device in their latest remake, as far as you get into this device and it moves you around. Yep. So GameDeveloper.com has a report here that says Twitch has terminated their safety advisory council to replace them with streamers. The quote here, I don't know from who, says looking ahead, the safety advisory council will primarily be made up of individuals who serve as Twitch ambassadors, which is not a quote that would support the phrase terminating. Now, last time I heard anybody say anything about the safety advisory council was years ago, but I don't think streamers particularly liked them, and I think there were quote Twitch ambassadors already on the council. So if this report is correct, then all they've done is fired the internal employees from being on the council to replace them with mostly just Twitch ambassadors, but they never gave the safety advisory council, unless I'm thinking of a different council, really any authority to do anything anyways. So I imagine this is not going to actually lead to anything more. Like, if anything, it probably will be very much like a council in which, you know, Twitch ambassadors come on to the council, express their concerns, and then be completely ignored by Twitch themselves. Yeah. Meanwhile, I would say that Twitch refused to comment when asked by CNBC whether the new console members would be paid. Refusing to comment and not commenting are the same thing, but if you say refuse to comment, it comes off more aggressive. But yeah, this one action alone doesn't seem like it's going to lead to a major change in how Twitch is run and what the rules and regulations of Twitch is, or what kind of product Twitch actually is in the first place. It might be something that's a first step, but inherently I suspect this is just about them getting rid of paid employees that would have been on the safety council. I wouldn't be surprised if we get another report that Twitch lays off a bunch of employees in the next few weeks. Now, inherently, if you were going to talk about safety at Twitch, safety for whom would be the first question to ask, because I definitely don't think a 10-year-old is safe to go on Twitch and not be randomly bombarded with hot tub streamers and Twitch thoughts, even if they're trying to avoid it. I don't think a viewer of any age is safe from seeing things or hearing things that they would prefer not to hear randomly being said or done. Of course, you take your chances. It is a more public forum than anything, but there is a lot of inconsistency and wildness and lack of professionalism amongst Twitch, as far as I can tell. A lot of Twitch streamers. And just kind of a lack of enforcement, inconsistent enforcement of the rules, which at the very least, YouTube is good about being draconian about the enforcement of their rules and trying to make everything advertiser friendly. And yeah, on the other side, I don't think content creators are particularly safe or protected on Twitch either, or financially safe in particular, just with their kind of ridiculous monetization requirements and the amount of work you would have to put into a Twitch account to be monetized is not particularly safe, in my opinion. Moving on, I believe Minecraft 15-year anniversary is over now. They do say you can collect the character creator items until June 4th, and then it'll be taken down. So with that, I believe I am now ready to stop following Minecraft so much. Meanwhile, the only Minecraft I've actually seen on YouTube recently is just Captain Sparkles saying he's playing his final Minecraft Let's Play, which last time I heard, he basically just said he was going to stop doing Minecraft on his first channel, but he might still do Minecraft every now and then on his second channel. So maybe he's changed his opinion since I last heard him say that. Gamatsu gives us some more details as far as Redfall's final update, adding offline mode and single player pausing and more. Definitely doesn't feel like there is anything too amazing here. They introduced this community standing, boss focused Elder's Nest mode and offline mode and single player pausing. So community standing seems to be some kind of level up system to maybe give you more of a perk system like in Fallout and maybe make you want to play a little bit more. But yeah, nobody really wants to play in the first place. I don't know what you do with Redfall if you're Microsoft. I think you probably just try and write it off completely. Refund every single person and write it off and destroy the source code, like we've seen with Hollywood movies these days, where you can do insane Hollywood accounting and just destroy a movie after it's completely finished and use it as a tax write-off. Although maybe it's just a case that Microsoft has too many tax write-offs already. A Ubisoft Forward date, time, and details have been confirmed according to GameDeveloper.com. I imagine this will talk about the Assassin's Creed Shadows game. It's also going to have an exclusive look at Star Wars Outlaws and the recently released X-Defiant game. A Diablo 4 Sorcerer hotfix is coming in Season 4. It's apparently not clear what the fix is targeting. That certainly was my reaction too, is that I had no idea there was anything wrong with any of the character classes in Diablo 4 or anything wrong in general, but also I'm not paying any attention to it. So yeah, that's almost not news at that point, because the headline here is fully admitting that they don't even have anything more than somebody said a hotfix is coming. Netflix and Mojang announced an animated series. This would technically, I guess, be the second Netflix Minecraft series, because the Telltale game of Minecraft story mode, season 1 and season 2 would have been on Netflix. At least season 1 it was on Netflix. Yeah. And I imagine this is going to be a case where it's going to be too little too late for Netflix to try and get a new audience of, I guess, even younger kids into Minecraft or into watching cartoons based on Minecraft, which seems like a tall order. Moving on. Hogwarts Legacy's free summer update has been detailed. It's going to feature a photo mode when it launches next week. We really haven't heard a lot of people talking or saying anything about Hogwarts Legacy. I imagine either people have finished the game pretty much, or they're just quietly still enjoying it, which maybe is the best way for gamers to enjoy games, is just to quietly enjoy it. But it certainly doesn't lead to headlines or people getting feedback whether a game is good or not, or getting better or not. Corpse Party 2 Darkness Distortion has new screenshots and visuals and the first look at the Japanese limited edition monkey doll. That doesn't sound like a real sentence, but apparently that is exactly what it is. So the little monkey with symbols toy, as far as I understand it, comes from the Phantom of the Opera, I think, book in particular, not just Andrew Lloyd Webber play, but it is at the very beginning of the Andrew Lloyd Webber Phantom of the Opera play too. These toys definitely did exist at some time. I'm not sure if they really existed in Japan in any large numbers, but I almost feel like they may very well have been created as a parody of what was in the Phantom of the Opera book, and automatons that would have been much larger. Inherently, the first monkey with symbols that would clash, automaton, would have had to have been fairly large. And I imagine there were real-world monkeys at circuses that would clash symbols. It is weird, though, that this is connecting to the Corpse Party series, Japanese horror series, that usually doesn't look animated this well. It looks the rest of them look very much more like a RPG Maker game. So, yeah. The fact that this is called Corpse Party 2 is weird because I'm pretty sure there's already a 3, 4, 5, 6. So, yeah, I'm not sure if they just rebooted the series. I don't know how many people would want a creepy doll, though, as a limited edition collection in the first place. That's another thought, certainly, to ask. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says the long-delayed Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown is getting a late 2024 release date. And Sony says that PS4 remains an important part of their business, with 50% of their users. Half of PlayStation's monthly active users on console are still on a PS4. You can certainly see why PS4s weren't cheap when you got them, and PS5s aren't cheap now. Plus, there were major long periods of time in which it was difficult or impossible to get a PS5. That being said, while Sony can say all this, my perception certainly is that we're seeing more and more Sony PS5 exclusive games coming out. Things not being ported or trying to be ported to the PS4 or being released for the PS4 at all. So I think Sony is definitely trying to get everybody to a PS5. And then they'll try to get everybody to a PS5 Pro, and then they'll try to get everybody to a PS6. I think Sony sees that is the way forward, is to try and get people to constantly update hardware, particularly since they want to create a new generation of consumers who would go to the Sony stores online and buy other Sony pieces of equipment like TVs on a fairly frequent cycle. Right. And then Hazelight Studios, what? They're the makers of It Takes Two, I believe. And so they were talking about It Takes Two being Steam Deck verified. Yeah. So then that's going to bring us to all the new games on Steam. Let's try to go through these fairly quickly. Is this English supported? No. So can't say yes to that. As far as making YouTube shorts, Hive Jump 2 Survivors. Guess we can say yes to Survivors clones. Tokyo Psychedemic here is weirdly mostly negative, which I'd kind of like to know why that's the case. There's only one language, one English language one, and it's not actually in English. No English support at all. So this is a game that I had on my fault list just to see if it was going to have an English version. Probably should take it off, but whatever, I'll just leave it on the fall list. This one looks too pink for my taste, so I'm gonna have to say no just because of the visuals. This one doesn't look interesting enough. Here we have It Takes Two Friends Pass, which it's interesting because it's not really a game per se, but I can see why it would justify having a YouTube short to say, hey, if your friend has a copy of this game, we now have a way on Steam for you to let your friend play over the internet online co-op without them having to buy a copy too, which that definitely was one of the major red flags I felt like with It Takes Two, is that either you are going to have people play on console in split screen co-op, or you're going to have people pay for 2 copies of the game, which that is not acceptable. This is an interesting art style, so I'll give it a chance as far as what looks like a point and click adventure game. And then, yeah, I'm trying to think of ways certainly to make less YouTube shorts, and if I see something that is mixed reviewed and I'm not particularly interested in it, I should just take it off of the follow list and not make a new YouTube short on it. This is being published by Daedalic Entertainment, but that kind of doesn't mean anything these days. Still doesn't look interesting to me. Here we have what looks like a flying game that's not unique enough in its screenshots to make me think it's an actual game that's worth playing past a few minutes. One Way Road Fire Hunt. I'll give that a chance. This is a prologue, so I'm not going to do prologues. This doesn't look good enough. Here we have a True Boxing VR. I imagine there's a real danger in swinging your fist around and actually boxing in VR, that somebody's going to get in front of you and you're just going to knock them out, if not kill them, or you're going to fling out your elbow. Like, inherently when you're shadow boxing, you should be looking in a mirror to watch your form, I suspect is the case. This definitely doesn't feel like somebody that knows how to throw a punch properly. It looks like somebody that's gonna just hurt themselves. So it almost gets down to an ethical question as far as, should I recommend something like this? Yeah, I don't think I'm going to, just for the high danger, low reward that you actually would get from that kind of experience. I do like boxing games, but I'm fairly more into the field of wanting to play rhythm games like Punch-Out. Should I give this a chance? No, it's suffering too much dark screenshot syndrome. One of the things about going back to my old third monitor is that I had the brightness calibrated / jacked up much higher on this, so now when I see, when I look to that monitor to see a preview of the video, it is much more realistic as far as what the visuals should look like to me. It's much brighter. It's just been easier to say much brighter. Interesting. So it's half anime visual novel and half platforming game. I'll give that a chance. Inherently, I think the other thing to do is consider integrating the follow list cleanup with looking at what games to make YouTube shorts around, and then if anything is on the follow list, I should consider it at that one point as far as whether I should leave it on the follow list, whether I should add it to the wish list, or whether I should take it off the follow list. And then I shouldn't make another YouTube short at all. Yeah, starting on Monday, I think I might try that. I'll stay with my consistent method today, but definitely feels like I could have a arbitrary rule of you get one YouTube short only, regardless of whether that is a YouTube short when you announced your game 6 months ago or not, or years ago. You don't get another one just because you finally have a release date. Here we have another one of these adult lewd games that should be in the adult section but are being allowed not to be in the adult section for some reason. Although inherently you have a very creepy, horrific looking game that too probably should be hidden behind some filters if we were going to treat apples and oranges the same. But nope, that's not the truth of it. Anything lewd is considered a million times worse than anything horrific or gory. Shoot balls and break stuff. It's not quite enough of a game. I think inherently, if you want a destructible environment, you want to be able to do really large amounts of destruction. I don't think this is in English. Nope. It is a Ukrainian only language game, which you might be fairly paranoid, or justified in being paranoid, to not download or play anything that supports Ukrainian language in just fear that it might be full of Russian propaganda or Russian spyware even. I wouldn't be surprised if there are some games that straight up have viruses on Steam and Steam just does not catch them all. Well, this looks creepy, but I have to say, you're not 100% suffering from dark screenshot syndrome here, and that visual design doesn't just look like it's some asset flipped horror character, so I'll give that one a chance. Trans-Siberian Railroad Simulator. I don't think this is quite interesting enough as a game, but it's rated very positively, so I'll let Mob Rule convince me otherwise. This looks like this might be something. We're still seeing a lot of weird, just kind of independent games. Nothing AAA, AA. And yep, I think that may still be the case for a while. But we are at least seeing today some decent games. Card game combat, dice rolling, and collectible elements. None of these images are wanting to load. So unless I was going to reload the whole page. Well, these animations look particularly good, so I'll give it a chance. Maybe it's a case that I didn't give these pages enough time to load. This looks like something different as far as visual novels, so I'll even give that a chance. Been perhaps a little bit more cruel against visual novels in the past months because of the vast number of them. This Vox Populi game is probably a little too political, centered around the European Union elections that are supposed to be happening this year. Yep. Which I guess they will happen. This is probably nothing, but it's worth giving it a chance. Give that a chance. Here we have just a collection of jigsaw puzzles. I think that's going to be a no. Oh, so I talked about a month ago or so watching a lot of Cracking the Cryptic. I am finally to the point where I'm starting to wean myself off of actually watching variant Sudoku puzzles being solved, following Cracking the Cryptic and others. But they have also been playing other puzzle games, and so the game Braid has a new anniversary edition, and he tried to play it, and he inherently immediately got content ID copyright claims on the audio. So that tells me that Jonathan Blow / the audio composer have not come to any new terms as far as the music, and probably don't care to, as far as letting streamers actually stream the game with the music playing, which is kind of a big factor. I think I'm gonna say no, just because of this developer Ghost Rush Games. That's a bad name. But yeah, that confirms to me certainly that I am not interested in trying to cover Braid and play it. Braid, when I first covered it many years ago, was one of the first games that irritated me as far as making content ID claims and rejecting fair use claims. This would have been well before the point where you could just click a button to eliminate the audio, the offending audio. I wish this was reviewed better, but it isn't, so I'm not going to make a YouTube short on it. Sorry, I went silent there as I was looking at it. Now this game was rated very positively, so I have to give it a chance. Yeah. It's funny, I guess in contrast of that, I don't know if there was really any music in The Witness. There are some video clips in The Witness, some of which I think do get copyright claimed. But yeah. That is one of the major problems. And certainly, while you could make an argument that maybe Jonathan Blow had a decent point to make as far as stopping people from streaming The Witness when it was brand new, that there's no point in stopping people now streaming The Witness, and there's no point in stopping people from streaming Braid Anniversary Edition. Everybody knows pretty much everything about Braid, although there is, I believe, some new stuff there. I'm a little surprised we haven't seen somebody straight up ask streamers to not spoil their game on launch for the first 2 weeks or so. Set it at kind of a reasonable time frame, and then you would get the audience of gamers on your side. This looks like this is potentially a direct copy of an early Final Fantasy game, or it at least looks way too close to an early Final Fantasy game, although it's possible that this actually was a 1980s game. Epic Quest does sound like something that would have existed. I'm gonna put this on a follow list, but I'm not gonna make a YouTube short around it. And I don't think I want to do anything with this. I need to be more decisive on what I want to make a YouTube short on or not. Although inherently, YouTube shorts are still the only things that are consistently getting views. All my pre-recorded stuff is not getting notifications, it's not getting views. Res Infinite is a game I really do like and wanted to show off, and it definitely is fairly irritating. I think I'm gonna say no to this game. It seems like it's got a lot going for it though. English and French game, but it's a Japanese thug looking character, if I was to guess. Yeah, I gotta say no. It's just not visually polished enough. Although in fairness, I guess I don't even remember what the other series, if there is another series, is airing at the moment. Res Infinite's the one I've seen, and I'm disappointed in 0 views on those. Although I don't know why I should be disappointed. It's just par for the course due to the YouTube algorithm not caring one bit about pre-recorded footage. Oh, this looks weird enough that I'll give it a chance. Got a kind of long list here of games that seem reasonable. Still seeing a lot of things that don't feel good enough. This is a prologue, so I'm gonna say no to it. But this Childish Life may be something in the future. The Dark Way has too much darkness in it, not showing me what the actual game is. Thunder Age is a tower defense game. Breaking Time. Yep. You know, I'm not sure. I've seen some YouTubers getting demonetized in the past for reusing content. I'm not sure how clip channels these days are particularly received by YouTube, whether they consider that just reusing your content or not. Certainly was pretty standard fare that you would make a clips channel. You would put the clips channel. So if all of a sudden YouTube is only allowing very successful channels to have clips channels, that's unfair, obviously. Not that YouTube has ever really been fair. I suppose it's also worth mentioning, I've seen some talk of YouTube leaks where internal documents have just proven what people always assumed was the case with YouTube and Google search, 2 leaks around 2 different products there. Even though Alphabet / YouTube / Google have all denied it completely. This is an interesting thought. Spot the difference in famous pieces of art. Most of these famous pieces of art probably public domain. So, yeah, I'll give that a chance. It's still a simplistic spot the difference game though. Here we have another Japanese only game. Yeah, it didn't look like there's enough game here. Taiko Frenzy. It's a VR game, or it looks like a VR game. Drumming game. Give that a chance. Definitely looks like it would be a VR game. Night of the Dead. Looks like it's being received particularly well. Version 1.0 out now. Yeah. So we'll make another YouTube short. Here's Platform 8. We definitely want to make a YouTube short around that. You can see it's already very positive. I don't think I'd ever really play Exit 8 or Platform 8. It is yet another Japanese only horror visual novel RPG maker like game. Very possibly not made with RPG Maker. Here we have a pirate game being rated very positively. Probably because it's really a prologue that's just free, even though it's not labeled as prologue. Man, I'm gonna start falling asleep here if I don't move fast enough. Yeah, about halfway through today, I started to feel fairly sleepy. Yeah, yesterday was particularly disappointing in that I didn't even manage to record one episode of footage, and instead I was just sitting around. Although, in fairness, part of the reason why I didn't accomplish anything is I was kind of just feeling a little under the weather. So had I tried to record an episode, I probably would have taken 2 or 3 breaks in it. And I'm increasingly just taking more and more bathroom breaks and breaks in general. The high number of Japanese games in the past couple days feels like that is due to a recent event in Japan. And we still can't get one of these iCommission games. Like, this publisher's flooding Steam with these. Now, on the other hand, if you like them, I imagine people love that they can get these somewhat high quality animations for hidden object games consistently. So yeah, it is mostly just I'm not the right audience. I do think he is probably ripping off people in the same way that any of these hidden object games are often just a little too expensive or fairly low quality. Mutant Football League 2. That's gonna catch some people's eye. This is an interesting animation style. Let's give that a chance. Inherently, one thing about my automated YouTube shorts that I'd like to improve, but I really don't have a way to improve, is that I'd like the visuals to be more varied. It's pretty much impossible to do it, though. Super Onion Boy Plus. Here you can see Formula 1 24 or F1 24 is mixed. Take that off the follow list. Shred off. This is a student project. I think why it's being received fairly well. Nah. It might just be actually acting a little too nice to these games. Got quite a lot I'm willing to make YouTube shorts around. Man, this is a lot of games today. You know, sometimes when it rains it pours. So this seems like this is very much a meme game. Political in part. I'm gonna have to say no to that. Wouldn't be surprised if even small political tangents are gonna start getting people in trouble on YouTube and other websites. Yeah, very quickly it's going to become a censorship issue more than anything else. And of course, people already say they're being censored for spouting their awful political opinions on one side or the other. So I would expect more of that. At a certain point, I'm surprised that nobody doesn't just have a website out there that's just nopolitics.com or happyplaces.com, something like that. Just like a tightly enforced no politics on any side are tolerated. I feel like there was a game called The Elysian Effect already. Maybe it was called something else. Right, well, the good news is we only have a few more games to look at. Then I'm going to try and do the headlines fairly quickly. Here we have a Jesus Christ Simulator that definitely does not feel quite reverent enough. Okay. So, as far as the 24-hour peaks go, I couldn't imagine that anything has changed too much here. Still seems like a lot of people are playing Fallout 4. I think the settlement aspects of Fallout 4 let you spend a lot more time in that game than you really need to if you're just going to play the main story. And that is certainly a danger as far as going into Fallout 4, so you might just spend way too much. Here we can see Governor of Poker 3 is doing fairly well at the 53rd spot. Fallout 76 is at the 58th spot. Now, it's not technically real-world gambling, but it is microtransactions to buy more chips if you run out of chips. So it is not gambling in the sense that you can actually win and cash out. It's more gambling in the sense that you're going to just constantly lose money. Or eventually run out of money. Well, I had a thought. Oh yeah, I was gonna say, I'm thinking I'll probably jump into Borderlands the pre-sequel, as silly as that might sound on the surface of it, as the next game. But you know, Borderlands the pre-sequel, as kind of a spin-off game to the Borderlands series, isn't a terrible comparison to Fallout New Vegas as a spin-off to the Fallout series. And in general, while covering Fallout New Vegas, I've been talking about how modern games should be and how a lot of what are in Bethesda games shouldn't exist in modern Bethesda games. The grindiness, the vendor trash, the over-encumbrance. Borderlands as a series fixes a lot of those problems. And since the next game in the series I should play is the pre-sequel, that's a pretty decent thought, I think, as a comparison. Of course, the other thought would be to not play any big long game and instead play several small games, which would be another thought. Of course, I'm not getting around to actually scheduling videos, so making a bunch of small games is just going to make that scheduling videos more difficult. As far as our chart goes, it is Friday and we are seemingly seeing small bumps in a lot of these games, so I will pretty much just leave it at that as far as the overall trend. And then there isn't too much going on here. This soul mask looks like it might be interesting. I wouldn't be surprised if it is. It's already on the fall list. It's early access. Survival multiplayer game. It says it has a single player element, but I'm not sure how much of that actually exists. The visuals here on the thumbnail don't seem to quite line up with the visuals there. What the heck happened there? Oh, this is interesting. I clicked on the link and it closed to Steam. And so if I was going to open Steam again, let's see, history, recently closed tab. Let's see, I'm trying to figure out how to get back to where, to the front page. Okay, Killed Clowns from Outer Space, the game, is also available for pre-purchase. I need to just open this in a new link. Yeah. We have until June 3rd, until this fest is over. And then I imagine it would be at least a week before any other summer fest might happen. They are back to advertising the Steam Deck this way. It definitely does make some sense to just have two different types of ads to catch people's attention. Yeah, very rarely do you just have one commercial for a product these days. Usually it is two commercials for the exact same product that are fairly different. Steam Deck seems to be falling under that line of thinking, where sometimes they will highlight games that have been verified on Steam, other times they just fall back to this default live action show. Animated GIF. Let's see, Platform 8 is trending, as well as Night of the Dead and several other games. Soul Mask is above Steam Deck even here. Interesting. Soul Mask is probably an example of one of the types of games that I would probably only hear if I was listening to more video game podcasts that actually talk about new video games, like Giant Bomb used to talk about them, and like back when I was willing to actually listen to Giant Bomb. On the other hand, every time I do listen to a video game podcast and they're super hyped about some new game, it doesn't feel like that game is received anywhere as much by actual gamers, and it often feels like they're just promoting something they hope is successful instead of promoting something that is possibly going to be successful. Yeah. Okay. So that will bring us to the Video Games Chronicle headlines. Let's go through these. There might actually be some news here I even want to comment on, but I am certainly running late already. Take-Two still wants to bring its biggest IPs to mobile. That's not super surprising. The quote here is, "We have to try and we will try," says CEO Strauss Zelnick. Spyro and Crash Studio Toys for Bob has partnered with Xbox on its next game. Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater might not release until 2025, it's claimed. Bungie says Destiny 2's Final Shape DLC was accidentally pushed live early on PS5. This is pretty much confirmed. That's exactly what happened, is it got pushed live. But there was a story element there that nobody could reach before they took the servers down and deleted the push. So storyline spoilers in particular were averted. They're saying avoid spoilers in general, following, quote, an extremely difficult leak. But yeah, it would really just be effects and abilities that you might get spoiled on. Let's see. Yeah, I guess I don't really care anymore about Destiny 2. I would like somebody to explain the entire Destiny narrative at some point in the future, but that'll be once the entire game is over as a live service game. Little Nightmares 3 has been delayed to 2025. Astrobot trailer gets 99% likes on YouTube, whereas Concord, which was another game I didn't even mention, only got 18%. Concord looks like an Overwatch clone with some very weird looking, most people seem to feel ugly looking aliens and characters. And yeah, I don't think really too much that you could even say about Concord. It's an Overwatch game. The characters in the cutscene come off somewhat like the Galaxy of the Guardians type characters, clones, ripoffs of that. But yeah, clearly this was the right direction for Astrobot, at least in YouTube reception. We'll see if that stays about the same in actual gameplay and sales. Take-Two discusses the decision to not announce GTA 6 for PC. Marvel Rivals is coming to consoles, and there's a closed beta in July. Marvel's Midnight Suns will reportedly be free on the Epic Games Store next week. Konami showed an extended gameplay footage of Silent Hill 2 remake. Monster Hunter Wilds gets its first gameplay trailer. This game had been announced, but this too would be a very Japanese audience first trailer that was at the PlayStation State of Play. I'm sure it got Monster Hunter fans hyped, but yeah, I'm not sure it will get Western players super hyped. Astrobot is getting its own full-price platformer. Until Dawn's PS5 and PC ports are getting a new trailer, but they aren't getting a release date. Silent Hill 2 Remake has a release date. Do we have an actual day? PS5 and PC on October 8th, 2024. God of War Ragnarok on PC requires a PlayStation Network account. PC version of Ghost of Tsushima only requires one for online multiplayer. God of War Ragnarok has been officially confirmed for PC, so I guess it wasn't officially confirmed, but it was generally assumed it was going to happen eventually. PlayStation's sci-fi multiplayer first-person shooter Concord gets its first gameplay footage and release date. Here's another protagonist in the Concord trailer. I really don't think it's worth watching. I will say though, when I first saw it, it looked very pretty, and I almost thought it was just whatever Beyond Good and Evil 2 was. I thought this was just yet another reboot presentation of Beyond Good and Evil 2 with another group of characters. I imagine you won't be seeing this level of detail usually when you are playing Concord, though. So having this level of cutscene detail, while impressive, might not be as helpful when you're talking an Overwatch clone compared to a single player game. Valorant head details new hate speech policies, including hardware bans for the worst offender. The announcement follows a viral incident where a player was threatened with sexual assault. Well, I haven't heard anything about this, but yeah. Seems like that is pretty much the standard response, and depending on what they define hate speech as, or how they enforce it, doesn't seem crazy. Perhaps the phrase hate speech is a bad phrase to use. Unacceptable activities policy or unacceptable behavior policies are probably better generic terms to use, because certainly hate speech has become a loaded phrase to a lot of people. Pac-Man's 64-player Battle Royale game has yet to reach 64 concurrent players on Steam. Wow. So, very, very poorly received. Fairly poorly advertised also. Yeah. Inherently, I do also just kind of feel like Pac-Man is not relevant, and nobody really wants to play a Pac-Man game. Nobody's making Pac-Man clones in 2024. Nobody's screaming to play ROMs of old Pac-Man games. Anyways, moving on. Redfall's final update has been released, adding offline play. Ribbon Riding Rhythm Shooter Arrow 2 is coming to the Xbox in September, followed by Steam. A Ubisoft forward date, time, and details have been confirmed on VideoGamesChronicle.com. Blaze announced its Evercade Alpha tabletop arcade machines that play Evercade cartridges. This week's free Epic Games Store title has been announced, Chivalry 2 replacing Farming Simulator 22. Astrobot and a giant PlayStation pinball appear in London for the UEFA Championships League finale. I would like to see the pinball. Interesting. So it is just a giant pinball. Although, I don't know how really playable it would be. And I'm not sure that this really has too much to do with Astrobot, other than they just have crammed some Astrobots as a way of advertising. Things certainly would be different if Astrobot had been the mascot for the PlayStation 1 or 2 and had been around that long. Like, it is worth pointing out that at least in Japan, the PS5 is still getting outsold by the Nintendo consoles. Like 5-1 at least. This is also probably a little bit too much viral marketing for a company as big as Sony, that they're trying to get people talking about it based on the UEFA Championship League final. A Diablo 4 sorcerer hotfix is coming in Season 4. Netflix and Mojang have announced an animated Minecraft series coming soon. Hogwarts Legacy Free Summer Update has been detailed. It will feature a photo mode when it launches next week. PlayStation's boss is very excited about upcoming mobile games. Yeah, Herman Holst says Sony is learning a lot from collaborations with the likes of NCSoft. So they definitely seem like they are promoting mobile games, but Sony also makes cell phones, I think, still, so there might be some disingenuousness happening here. Destiny 2's The Final Shape DLC is seemingly leaked after players gain early access. The long-delayed Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown gets a late 2024 release date. Sony hopes to entice PC players to the PS5 by releasing tentpole games for the console first. I don't think that's going to work one bit. I think it's just going to irritate PC gamers to the point that they're going to stop buying even the really good tentpole games when they finally do come out on PC. I think you're just asking to be boycotted at that point. Sony once says that PS4 remains an important part of their business with 50% of their users. Black Ops 6 editions and cross-gen plans have seemingly leaked. Homelander hits Mortal Kombat 1 next week. Activision has won a $14.5 million lawsuit against a Call of Duty cheat maker. Modern Warfare 3 and Warzone patch notes detail today's Season 4 update. This would have been a few days ago, maybe even a week ago. June's quote free games from Amazon Prime Gaming have been announced. Always quote free because you have to own Amazon Prime, which is not free. PlayStation State of Play was announced for Thursday. It's already happened now. This is all old news. And then Stellar Blade and the PS5 topped the US sales chart in April. And that is going to bring us to the Gematsu headlines. Toomba Special Edition launches August 1st for the PS5, Switch, and PC, and then later for the PS4. Let's see if we put this on the follow list. Definitely looks like an old game. I think it is. Toys for Bob partners with Xbox to publish its next game. Little Nightmares 3 has been delayed to 2025. We can check to make sure that's on the follow list. It is, but I'm not going to make another YouTube short just because the game's gotten delayed. The Exit 8 sequel, Platform 8, is now available on PC. Woohoo hack and slash action game Burning Sword Death Sun has a debut trailer and screenshots on Gematsu.com. Hunter x Hunter and Nin X Impact character trailers for Leorio, Kurapika, and Nitiro. Princess Maker 2 Regeneration for the PS4 and 5 have been delayed to August 8th due to content changes, aka censorship, the removal of items to increase the daughter's breast size, and the removal of endings, marriage with father and marriage with butler. So yeah, removal of endings is a major removal of content. Certainly, I could not recommend anybody purchasing this game for the PlayStation, even with just those two censorships. Astrobot has been announced for the PS5. Monster Hunter Wilds first trailer and screenshots are available at Gematsu.com. Daemon X Machina Titanic Scion teaser trailer is available at Gematsu.com. Silent Hill 2 Remake launches October 8th. Path of Exile 2 launches in early access in late 2024 for the PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. Which, my understanding on how Path of Exile is a seasonal game confuses me as far as what Path of Exile 1 would be. But I might actually be confusing Path of Exile with a different series overall. I don't believe there's a Steam link showing up here, though. So let's move on. Rune Factory Project Dragon has the latest footage and details at Komatsu.com. Marvelous had a game showcase, and obviously there's been some presentations there. Until Dawn's remake launches this fall. Where the Winds Meet have added a PS5 version, and it has a gameplay trailer and screenshots available at Komatsu.com. Let's look at some of these screenshots for just a second. Marvel Rivals adds a PS5 and Xbox Series versions. Alien Rogue Incursion first look trailer and screenshots are available at Komatsu.com. Skydance's Behemoth launches this fall. So apparently Behemoth had been mentioned before, but I don't recall ever seeing something like this. This is a battle game of some sort. Seems to be maybe VR focused, where there are giant behemoth monsters fighting on the side of some enemies and potentially fighting on your side. Also, it feels somewhat like Shadow of the Colossus if it were in VR and you were also fighting other humans at the same time. A free-to-play dark fantasy action RPG Ballad of Antara has been announced for multiple platforms, including the PS5. This looks like this might be an interesting game. Feels kind of like a Dark Souls type game if I was to guess. But it is very early. Infinity Nikkei PS5 beta test begins in quarter 3 of 2024. This is another game that was shown off in the State of Play and I really haven't even mentioned. Infinity Nikkei is the console new game from the Nikki series, which is a girl dress-up game series where it's kind of the same ideas that Nikki here is going to do some platforming and also change her dresses, which maybe will change her abilities on the fly. I think some of it is also just going to be fairly grindy RPG, almost like Pokemon hunting. Yeah, you can see a heavy focus on the outfits. But there's actual platforming here. The dresses give some abilities. She can turn into a cat creature to get through some areas. Yep. So yeah. It looks like it might be a somewhat girl-friendly game, although on another level it might still not feel appropriate for little girls, depending on what kind of parent you are or what region you live in. It might very well be a case that there's just a lot of non-little girls who want to play Infinity Nikkei just to look at Nikkei as a character playing dress up. It does have this kind of weird in-trailer that makes it feel like much more of a dramatic game than one would expect. Yep. Seeing this come to PS5 is probably bigger news than it seems, but only if people actually care. And I'm not sure people will care. Moving on. Dynasty Warriors Origins has been announced for the PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. It's due out in 2025. This might be a decent game to jump into the Dynasty Warriors series. The visuals look rather good if it plays particularly well, and if it is called Origins, that does imply that it might be a very good starting point to play the Dynasty Warriors series. If you need to play the Warriors series or any of the Warriors games, which is a big if. God of War Ragnarok is coming to PC on September 19th. Next Story of Seasons game, latest footage and details have been listed on Gamatsu.com. Concord launches August 23rd. Here we can see 3 of the main protagonist characters in this Overwatch clone. Show off some of the screenshots without having to sit through the actual trailer. Moving on. Pharmagia, formerly Project Magia, launches in 2024. So it's Pharmagia. Redfall's final update is now available. It adds an offline mode and single player pausing and more. The puzzle adventure game Guayota has been announced for Switch and PC. I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly. It's probably Gay or Guy. Gayata would be my guess. See what the screenshots actually look like. Doesn't really look like too much. Persona 3 Reload Expansion Pass Wave 2 launches May 31st. Didn't really think they would be making expansion passes. Yeah, you can see a lot of these DLCs are being received fairly mixed. Mostly negative on the expansion pass here. I kind of question if they aren't going to just eventually bundle all the expansion pass DLC that's being poorly received into the main game and resell it, repackage it once again. The main game is overwhelmingly positive, though. Dragon Ball Sparking Zero Fused Warriors trailer and screenshots are available on Gamatsu.com. All of this is really just coming from Marvelous, it feels like. Well, not this one, but most of them. Evil vs. Evil launches July 16th. Vampire cooperative first-person shooter. Interesting. There was a sci-fi show called Good vs. Evil, and I believe at some point it might have been a USA Network show called Good vs. Evil, and then it got canceled from USA Network and then resurrected as G vs. E on the Sci-Fi Channel, which seems kind of ridiculous that you would bother changing the name so little. It was kind of an interesting premise, I think, originally, but it didn't go anywhere. A roguelike real-time strategy game, Grit and Valor, 1949, has been announced for the PS5, Xbox Series, Switch, and PC. The Garden Path launches July 30th. It's a slice of life gardening simulator. Need to hurry up. I'm losing steam, I can tell. I'm losing energy. Action strategy game Time Melters is coming to the PS5 on July 11th. This is one that actually looked like it might catch my attention, but I didn't see this trailer at all. I think I just stopped paying attention halfway through the stream. So yeah, you'd have to assume it's a single player game if you can just rewind time. Make clones of yourself. It's an interesting abilities with kind of interesting time setting and costumes. But I can't help but have the feeling that almost all of this trailer is just showing a character running forward or running backwards while casting spells. I'm not sure there's really too much of anything going on here. I would need to see more variety in what's actually happening for sure to really be sold on it. A pixel art puzzle game called Chasing the End for PC is going to be published by NeoWiz. Pixel art, they say. Oh, we definitely are getting some actual announcements. I don't know what specifically says this is pixel art. Yes, if I zoom in, it's pixely like anything else would be, but at proper scale, it just looks like this is very nicely 2D animated style of game. Yeah. Don't really see anything that I would call pixel art, per se. Garden of Banton 1, 2, 3, and 4 are now available for the PS4 and 5 and coming soon to the Xbox One and Series and Switch. Famitsu sales from 520 to 526 have been updated on Gamatsu.com. I imagine we're going to see Paper Mario very high in the first spot, and then Earth Defense Force for the Switch surprisingly high. The spin-off World Brothers game, World Brothers 2, in the third spot. Then the PS5 version of World Brothers 2, Earth Defense Force World Brothers 2, is fairly low in the 13th spot. Ys Memories, The Oath of Felgahan, is in the 17th spot, debuting. Cars RPG in the 18th spot for Switch, debuting. And then the other new game is Neptunia, Hyperdimensional Neptunia Rebirth 1, 2, 3 triple pack, selling in the 23rd spot, which may not be too bad considering it's a triple pack of games that many people in Japan, I imagine, already own. Hardware wise, the Switch OLED model is beating the PS5. Add in the Lite and the original, and you have them doing very well, whereas the PS5 and digital edition added together still doesn't beat the OLED model. Xbox Series X numbers still seem to be fairly high these days. It's still not a real comparison, the overall total sales of the PS5 are into the 4 approaching 5 millions, where the overall Xbox Series X are barely over a quarter of a million. Lords of the Fallen Clash of Champions update is now available. The Legend of Heroes Trails Through Daybreak demo launches June 4th for the PS4 and Switch. Corpse Party 2 Darkness Distortion, new screenshots, visuals, and a first look of the Japanese limited edition monkey doll are all available to see on Gematsu.com. Keep on going. We're almost done. Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown launches September 12th. Iki Unite and Sunsoft is back. Retro game selection. Switch physical editions have been announced for Japan. I doubt these games are going to come to the West. Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance, the Ultimate Beginning trailer, is available on Gematsu. I don't know if we really need a trailer for what is just a better version of a game that's already out. Marvel's Spider-Man 2 sales have topped 11 million. Okay. A wholesome exploration game, Caravan Sandwich, has been announced for the PS5, Switch, and PC. Yeah. I don't think there's a lot of people playing Sandland. Which... yeah, I don't know how you would have gotten a lot of people to play Sandland. This looks interesting. Lost Helden commented gameplay trailer is available on Gematsu. Then that's going to bring us to the GameDeveloper.com headlines, which we don't have too many of those, so let's rush through them. Wolchin Lords of Mayhem is going to lose multiplayer and dev support in September. Wolchin Studio says sizable foundational hurdles prevented it from further iterating on the dungeon crawler, so it's moving on to other projects. This looks like this is a Warhammer 40k game. So yeah, they are just abandoning their live service game, which it seems like that's what it is. Toys for Bob teams with Microsoft on its first indie game. There's an obituary for Jeff Fallen, video game composer, who passed away at 58 years old. There's a report that Twitch has terminated its safety advisory console to replace them with streamers. Panic has recovered stolen playdates worth $400,000 after lots of detective work. Modders or developers, it's time to pay them, according to this editorial from GameDeveloper.com. And then they also had a deep dive on how animation of Little Kitty Big City rejects realism to achieve something else. I'll leave it at that. That's going to be it for this show. Hopefully on Monday I'll be able to stream a lot earlier. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, and keep on watching. Thanks.